Welcome to the Shunned Podcast. It's a new year, 2020, a whole new decade, and I'm going to keep exposing religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. Being at the beginning of a new year and a new decade, I kind of see big things in the future. More and more people are speaking out against these different cults or religious organizations, and I think there's really a lot of momentum building in the ex-Jehovah's Witness movement. I wanted to get this year and this new decade off to a great start. So, one of the things that I've done is I've released a new website called xjwhelp.com. So, again, that's xjwhelp.com. I've made videos to help answer some of the common questions that I get asked, some of the issues that I see come up that people are struggling with, and I'm going to continue to add to this library of videos there. There's a free downloadable roadmap to help you see where you are in your journey. There's resources where you can find local meetups, online meetups through the Shunned Recovery Project, other projects and books that might be of help, and even a live chat service or individual coaching if that's what you're looking for. I will continue to add to the site regularly. So to celebrate the release of xjwhelp.com, to celebrate the new year, the new decade, I'm releasing 10 episodes this month instead of 2. So, I just really wanted to do something to kind of blow it out. My initial goal was to do an episode a day for the whole month of January. That was a ridiculous goal that I could not meet, and that's okay too. But I've got 10 episodes ready to go, and I'm going to start releasing one a day, Monday through Friday for the next 2 weeks. So, I really wanted to kind of do something to show, there's so many people who are reaching out to me. It's really hard to keep up. There are so many of us out here that want to tell our stories, and that's an amazing thing. So in order to streamline this process of releasing so many, I'm not going to tell you who you're about to meet. You can read the description if you're interested in that. That way I can add this to the front of each episode without having to spend time recording each individually. So let's dive right into the interview and get to meet today's guest.
My name is Joaquin. I'm 35 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am shunned.
All right, Joaquin. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
All right. So for me, it was I'm from Venezuela. My mother is from there. My father was from Spain. He moved over. He was a chef. So he had a friend in Venezuela where he wanted to start a restaurant. So he went over there. He's 12 years my mother's senior, and so he met her. My mother at the time already had one child, and I think probably about a year after marriage they had me. So we're living over there, and my mom had a neighbor. She had a witness neighbor. She was Portuguese, if I'm correct, and my older sister started going to the meetings with her. And at the time, my mom was pretty much like a devout Catholic. And I think there's probably a picture out there of me next to a Christmas tree, like at 1 year old. So I don't even have memories of that. I think my earliest memory is like at 2 years old, blowing a birthday cake, a very vague memory of that. So that quote unquote worldly life was very, very, very small.
Yeah.
My sister starts going to the meetings, and my mom kind of thought, they're just a bunch of loonies. They're probably gonna, get there, and there's like a band and playing. Like she had this grandeur idea of what the church was. But I think when she started going, she saw that it wasn't that. The witness life is, especially the meeting life, is very, business-like, is very benign in some ways, which is a stark difference from what you see at Catholic churches, what you see at Pentecostal churches, and all those other ones, where it's kind of more vivacious, more of a show. And at least in her mentality, she didn't want something like that. She wanted something calmer, if that's what she wanted. And she was a chain smoker at the time too. She would say she smoked like 3 or 4 packs a day, except when she was pregnant.
Yeah.
She would always say that. But when she went, I guess it left an impression on her. And she says that the day she kind of decided to do that. She had a half a cigarette and then never smoked again. So it had an impact on her to that point where it wasn't a struggle to leave smoking. And once we moved over here, we found our local congregation here, and she started studying with them. My sister got baptized first in '89, and then my mother in the year after. Um, and by then, I was 4 or 5 years old, growing up in the religion. At that point, I remember back then here in Miami, we had the conventions were done at this race park. Actually, the Hialeah race park that comes out like in The Godfather 2, and it comes out in other movies, where it's like an outdoor kind of race park. It was big in the 50s and 60s. It's recently been renovated and stuff, but we would have our conventions there. It was beautiful because you have like a full garden and everyone's outside, and you have to dress to the nine. And my mom used to make our clothes as kids, so she used to stitch them up and put them together. And you have all those early memories. There's pictures of me like with shorts, but like these like Florida colored shorts, like white or not corduroy, seersucker,
Yeah.
and like all these crazy late '80s, early '90s kind of clothes that takes you back when you look at pictures. And I was in the Spanish at the time. Uh, all throughout pretty much my youth, I was in the Spanish hall. And so we were in that congregation for a long time, probably till, I don't know, '96, '97, in my early youth. So probably up until I was like 12. And throughout you have that, you're, especially being a boy in the organization, you're kind of looked at as like, hey, let's give him talks, let's give him the readings. And back then the number two talks, which were based off of 15 or 30 verses
Hmm.
of a chapter in the Bible, you had to make an introduction, read it, and a conclusion. And as a kid, my mom would pretty much drill me, which I kind of appreciate now, more from the aspect of how to build a speech. And my grammar in Spanish stuck with me because my mom was very drill sergeant about that. If you're going to get
Hmm.
up there, you're going to that's not how you write this, let's write it that way. My grandmother is a teacher, well, at this point retired teacher, so grammar was instilled in her. And she was big on that. If you're going to do these talks, you're going to stand up straight, you're going to project your voice. What theme are you working on? Back then in the theocratic ministry school, they gave you themes, and moving your hands, using metaphors, all those. And so my mom really instilled in those in me when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I'm going up there and giving talks, and and then eventually started doing number four talks, where it was the number four one was done. I think the reasoning book was used back then for that they would give you a theme,
Yeah, I
and they
think
would
so.
yeah, they give you a theme, and you have to take those 3, 4 sentences. Sometimes they were so vague that you had to just bluff, I guess, or look for other stuff. And I which thinking back now, it's like if they give you a theme of I don't know, demon. Demons probably have 30 texts in the Bible of it, but if they gave you a theme of I don't know, Rosh Hashanah, or the Sabbath. It's like 4 sentences, and you're like, okay, what do I do with this? I gotta expand this to 5 minutes. But every time, my mom was very big on that, and my mom was famous for the quick little pinches and punches of like when I would fall asleep, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because
my mom was a pincher.
I there is no sleep like the sleep you get at a Kingdom Hall or at an assembly. You reach REM cycle so quick. And for me, I was very stealthy with having the Bible in a good position to that nobody else knows I'm sleeping, but my mom definitely knew. So she would, her hand was like the exorcist head, where she could hold the skin and then turn and turn and turn, and you're thinking, I don't think wrists work like that. Like that looks very impossible. I think you have a demon, mother. I don't know what's going on. And so she'd be waking me up and stuff, and that was, I was a serial sleeper like all throughout until before I left. Like, if you put me in a meeting, I'm falling asleep. It's gonna
Really?
happen.
I never could
Oh,
fall asleep ever. Never could do it.
like it's never on purpose, but it just happens. It's just like
Well, it's
magic,
boring.
it just
Yeah,
happens.
it's very
Yeah.
monotonous, being at a meeting,
Oh,
so it's easy to sleep through it. How did you see the world growing up? Um, as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, how did it kind of make you see the world around you?
well, I think at the time I was very obedient, not just like to the organization, but mostly my mother. I was very obedient, like that fear of God thing.
Yeah.
I think back now, it wasn't really a fear of God; it was a fear of mother that he eventually probably transition, and not in a bad way. It's not to say that, like,
Fear of
my mom was,
displeasing her.
yeah. Some of it was Iron Fist.
Yeah.
There was a bit of that, but never to like the point of abuse or anything like that. It was just, Hispanic moms, they have two weapons, their hands and their flip flops. So you'll hear from from a Hispanic, the chancleta, where it's like. It's almost like a nunchuck or like a ninja star. No matter where you are, they have pinpoint accuracy, and they will get you. They will get you from wherever. So there was a bit of fear of that.
Yeah.
She was, my mother, as opposed to my father. My father was very old school kind of worker, where it's that mentality of, they bring the bacon home, they bring the money, and the mother does the child rearing, the mother does the raising. So my mother was both. She was both the nurturer, and she was both the enforcer, and she had a good balance of it. When it came down to the religion, and with the witnesses, like she did come from an aspect of coming from another religion. So in her head, I believe she was doing for us what she thought was best, because she had tested out another religion, and now she knew, okay, this is the one that I feel like, gives my kids and myself the best chance. So there was no choice in the household. It was, this is the truth. Like, this is what we got. You're gonna go to the meetings. If you're under this roof, uh, you're gonna follow this. But it also wasn't in a way that I probably didn't feel like I had a choice. I was never very rebellious in general. So my view of the world was pretty much like a follower. Like, okay, I'm following my parents, I'm following my mom. They instilled in us a good set of rules in regards to, do no harm, but defend yourself if necessary. Speak when spoken to. I remember I would go to, if we would go on studies, or if we would go to guest house. I've always kind of been a fat kid, whether at heart or in reality. And if they offer me food or drink, I'm going to go. My first answer is yes, yes, and yes. And my mom would give me that look of like, when we get home, when we get home, something's going to happen, kind of thing. And I would be like, it's food, I love food. And,
Yeah,
uh,
food's great.
yeah, food's great. But even then, that was probably as rebellious as I ever got, because it was pretty much, I'm going to follow them, and things will go well. But growing up in that, obviously you have that idea of, people that aren't in the organization aren't good. In some ways, thinking back now, I probably was fighting against it, but not fighting against it in a way that I would actually manifest it in person, or manifest it to my mother, like, no, that's a good guy, it's a good person. Because I would have neighbors. I had this one neighbor in front of me, in front of our house, super nice guy, child of a single mother, and he would always come to the house. Hey, you want to hang out? And that was probably the extent of my mother allowing it. But if it was 8, 9 o'clock, it'd be like, hey, get home. Time to come home. But I never had in my until probably 14, 13, 14. I never had that core group of friends um, in the witness world that I could go to. I did have them in school, which in turn, even now, years later, we still hang out, probably once a year and stuff like that. But I never made the correlation of you know that these people are good. It was always these people are good, but they're worldly. They don't have our Christian morals or but only I would probably only think that in in verbiage as opposed to actually feeling that. Because if I would have actually felt that, I wouldn't have been friends with them.
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah, you just
uh,
knew you were supposed to feel that way.
I was supposed to feel that way exactly. I was supposed to feel like, okay, these people are good, but they could be better if they were witnesses. But never really thinking what that actually entails, like what's behind that. Especially at that time. At that time, I was a follower, so
Mhm.
I would do certain things that now thinking back was probably my way of coping. Like for example, when I got to middle school, I started coming out more of like what or who I would become, especially with music. In when you're in elementary school, it's mostly like cartoons and video games.
Mhm.
Once you get to middle school, the hormones start kicking in. So now it's girls and also music, and those are kind of like the venues you have to rebel a bit. And at that time, that's when I started, seventh and eighth grade, with friends and stuff, kind of like messing around with some of the girls, and nothing like huge, but more like kissing and making out, and truth or dare, and things that kids do at that time. Well, not nowadays. Nowadays it's pretty bad, but but at least then it was somewhat innocent. Thinking back, and I think that's when my mindset, not so much my mindset, but the how I outwardly started um, manifesting that came a little more against what my mom wanted. Because her being the enforcer, of course, like the music, especially in Hispanic culture, I've always been, a metalhead or rocker or whatever. Always like that kind of music, and that equals Satan. You know,
Mhm.
like there, everything is satanic, everything is demonic. So with that, you're kind of um, you want to listen to it, but then you're always thinking in the back of your head, wait, is this satanic? Is this demonic? What is this image? And then I'm hiding my music. I'm hiding, the CDs I buy.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
hiding, stuff that I get, because I don't want to run into that fact of like, oh, she's not gonna like it, or she's gonna say it's demonic, and and my mentality was pretty much, more of a follower. Don't make any noise, because even at that time, once I turned 13, we moved to another congregation, and it was a brand new congregation. It was like in the same block. The Kingdom Hall was in the same block of my house,
Oh
so
wow.
I would literally walk to the Kingdom Hall, and I remember it was a Presbyterian church, I think, and we the witnesses bought it, and I was part of, I would go in, as opposed to, obviously with all the groups and stuff, go in there and, paint the place up, clean it up, fix it up. I remember at 13 or 14 going in there, and, a few days when we were part of the group, to go in and do construction and do, we have to clean the Kingdom Hall, we have to replace the carpet, and building it up. And it was like I would walk to meeting,
Mhm.
and at that time there weren't a lot of boys, there weren't a lot of men, so I would get a lot of talks. I would get a lot of number two talks, a lot of number four talks, a lot of substitution talks. When people would bail out, I was the kid to go to. Like he's really good at making a talk last minute, and that goes back to how my mom kind of instilled in me the formatting, the grammar, eh, of the structure of how to do a talk. But even at that time, I would probably dabble a little bit in regards to, not to the extent of a double life, but kind of, because I would have friends that were non-JWs. I would have um, uh, probably a closer relationship with them than anyone in the congregation. And my worldview wasn't changing, but probably the roots of it were there, where they probably wouldn't come up late until later on.
Mm-hmm.
But I never challenged my mother to the point of, this, what is this? I never challenged the religion. I think as you grow up, and we see that a lot with second generation. Um, what's the word I'm looking for? Coming from another country, pretty much. My parents being the first ones, and our generation being the second one. We see that a lot, where their first language is English or another language. Sorry, their first language is Spanish. Mine became English. So the information you're hearing in the meetings isn't going to your heart. The witnesses would always say, what's the language of your heart? And at that point, it was English. So in the Spanish, you're more following, because those things aren't really reaching you to your heart. So it was more of a following thing. Certain terms didn't mean what you thought they meant, because now you're having to translate those things in your head. So I think there was a disconnect there, where I was just following and I wasn't really questioning. And my attitude at the time wasn't that of questioning. It was very sheep-like.
Well, sure.
Yes, mother.
Yeah. So are you? Can I ask? Are you saying that in Spanish, the way things are worded, is different, or it is experienced differently than those who are going through it in English?
I would say it not so much Spanish specifically,
Okay.
but any second language.
Gotcha.
So if you are German, and now you have to now you have to preach in another language. Let's say you go to which happens a lot in the organization, where you're going to where the need is greater, quote
Right.
unquote, and you're going to a Spanish congregation. This would happen all the time with like a circuit overseers and things like that, where they come and they speak Spanish, with an American accent, and so it's their second language. So I'm sure they went through some of that too. Where when you read something, just to give you an example, Jehovah of armies is a term in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
In Spanish, it's Jehovah de los ejércitos. Now, ejército is armies in Spanish. Now, for me, I could connect armies and ejércitos, but armies makes more sense to me, because when you're watching TV, when you're reading, you hear, oh, the army went in there and tore up Germany in World War II, or the army, we sent the troops over there. So it makes more sense in my head, where I could make a visual of that. But if I hear it in Spanish, I have to translate it to English, and that you lose some of that in the translation, because I don't think of ejército. Right. I don't think of ejército as army. I think of it as a bunch of people, as opposed to an army with guns, violence. I start connecting all of those things, where you see the power.
Yeah.
So that's just as an example. So you're constantly having to translate those things in your head once your language becomes something else, especially as an immigrant. Now my language became English, so I probably did lose a lot of that message being in the Spanish in my youth, where maybe at first as a kid, you're kind of being told things, but then you start becoming who you are, especially as an immigrant child. The parents don't change their language. They may assimilate, but that's because they're at an older age. Me at a younger age, I become where I'm at that point. So my language is English. So I'm sure at that point maybe the message got through, but it didn't get through all the way.
Yeah,
Something
that's
was
really
lost there.
fascinating. I know of people who have native English speakers who have then tried to learn, let's say Spanish and go to the Spanish congregation to help out, and then they wake up because going to the meetings in Spanish, I guess, like you're saying, it's not really connecting with them because that's not
Hmm.
their first language. And so it kind of gives them enough distance to where they start to question things and they start to be able to finally think about and process what they've learned their whole life. And then it kind of starts to fall apart and they start to wake up.
Yep.
So that's
Yeah.
that's really interesting. I didn't as a I speak one language and I'm not sure how well I do at that. I do not have a second language, so I've never
Oh,
experienced that. I've never
yeah.
I took Spanish, Latin, and French in school,
Oh, okay.
a year of each. But I guess when I think back, yeah, I was learning words to replace the words that I already knew that had feeling attached to them. And so
Right.
that wasn't all going to translate, even though the actual verbiage did. So that's interesting. I've never thought about how that must be for people.
Yeah, funny enough, somebody told me a joke this week. If you know three languages, you're trilingual. If you know two languages, you're bilingual. If you know one language, you're American. Uh,
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we
and
tend to have.
this was from an American girl that
Yeah,
told me.
yeah, we have a very U.S. centric culture
Uh-huh.
in
Yep.
ways. Oh, and I wanted to ask you. So, how did it feel? So, I always thought it was weird that, like, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't supposed to shop at locally we have like the St. Vincent de Paul thrift shop, okay? And you would be told not to shop there because the money you spent went to the Catholic Church, okay? Or what
Right.
that's it was associated with it. But yet they would buy buildings that were former churches and convert them into
Yep.
kingdom halls. And I know we had an assembly hall in Indianapolis that was some sort of former church. And I mean, you walked in, it had the stained glass and the big balcony. It felt like a church. And I always thought
Yeah.
that was super weird. And I always felt weird in that building. So you get this kingdom hall. It used to be a Presbyterian church or whatever. Did you as a kid, like, did you feel weird about it at all? Or did you just think, whatever, it's a new kingdom hall?
Um. You know what? It's funny. It's funny you say that. You would all there was a few there's a few Kingdom halls down here. I remember one probably later in life, well, not later in life, but when I was 18 or 19, I visited out west part of Miami where you could tell it was a church because it was pretty big. It had a big stage, and the chairs weren't replaced with normal chairs. They were pretty much, they took the church style benches and they covered it in padding, so you could still see like the wood in the bottom where when you kneel, you put your knees on there, and the holders for like the Bibles. And that always felt a little odd being there. But at that point, that I was like 13, one thing that really did stand out, they would baptize their followers inside of the church. So behind the stage, there was an opening, like an arc, like a hole in the back, and that the pool was there. And I remember it was full of algae and stuff, so we had to clean it up. And I remember thinking, wow, this, so they baptize their people here, and there's always this mugginess smell that that I feel when I go into like the gaudy Catholic churches that are huge and stuff. And there was a bit of that in this building, but I never thought it to be horribly weird. But there is that bit of a feeling of like other people were here doing some other um, religious, you know, offerings or religious sermons, and so there was a bit of that feeling. I never correlated or put together why are we purchasing these things, or never thought that far in the
Yeah.
levels. But there was always this eerie feeling of, we are somewhere else right now, that they did another kind of religious thing here, but now we're taking it. That didn't feel the same as if you went into a Kingdom Hall that you knew from the ground up was built by the witnesses. So there was those two feelings when you would go to one as opposed to the other.
Yeah,
But I
and I
never
mean,
connected. Uh,
yeah, we were told, like we weren't supposed to go to a wedding in a church or a funeral in a
oh
church.
yeah,
And so to then
yeah.
sit in a church that still felt churchy in some ways, even though it had the bland Kingdom Hall, uh, like
Oh
padding or
yeah.
chairs or artwork or whatever in there, it still felt churchy, and it always I always felt weird there. And so I was just wondering how it was in the one that you all had. Um, so how does life kind of progress for you? We've talked a little bit about your progression as far as giving talks and some of your friends and things like that as you went into your teenage years. So how did things progress as you went into your teenage years and young adulthood, just for you as a person? And then did you get baptized somewhere in there?
Yeah, so I got baptized at 12. I
Oh,
was
12.
12 years old. And I remember when I was before I got to that congregation, I would be doing mics and stuff, and doing some of the things, and I was like 10, 11. But I do remember not so much that there was a strong peer pressure, but there is a peer pressure to it where I remember hearing, well, you could do these things now, but, you can't do microphones, or, you can't do number four talk if you're not baptized. And my mom never pressured me. I remember asking to get baptized like at 11, and my mom saying, you gotta wait. And me thinking, oh, that's really adult. Yeah, I should wait. I don't feel ready yet. And but then at 12, I really kind of pushed it. And I know, thinking back now, part of it was because I wanted to do mics. I wanted to do the sound system in the back, which now you think, wow, that was those were the carrots that were being dangled. Like, oh boy,
Well, those were I always loved that they called them privileges. It's not a
yeah,
privilege. You're working for the Kingdom Hall
yeah,
for free.
exactly, yeah. And I think back now, and sure, did I believe? Sure, but I mean, who believes at 12? Like, who really believes something at 12?
Sure.
Like I probably believed in Darkwing Duck at 12. Like, you know what I mean? Like that changes. And but at the time, of course, you feel that, and you can't differentiate peer pressure from actual belief, or wants to actual belief. And there was probably a lot of that, because I remember thinking distinctly, if I get baptized now, I could do this, or look, that person's kid is doing that, and they got baptized. Some of it was probably internal pressure. As a 12-year-old, you're a follower. You want to be doing what everybody kind of respects of you. Part of it was probably from some of the elders that were in because we used to have book study in our house, and there was this one elder that I was always kind of go to for things, and he was always very nice and always very kind of leave things up to me to think about. He was never that kind of pressury kind of person. Even when I first got in trouble, he was the person I went to. And so when I got baptized, at that point, they started giving me more things, and they kind of, they see you as the golden boy,
Oh
especially
yeah.
me, being the fact that my father was never a witness. So my father didn't convert. It was only my mother. So, everyone's trying to be that surrogate father in some ways, or at least thinking it. They might not be doing those actions, but, every time they go out to preach with you, hey, go out with this elder. Everyone's trying to find some life lesson to give me there. Let's have our full house moment. And come here. This is how you knock on the door, and this is how you do this, and maybe try doing this a little better, and always someone trying to teach me something. And so they view you that way. So if you get baptized now, it's like, boom, perfect. This is the guy. This is the horse we're gonna ride. Let's get on this horse right here. By the time I moved over to the other congregation, the one in the same block as my house, they're giving me more talks. They're giving me more privileges. And, obviously being too young at that point, they're not going to like look at me as a ministerial servant, but, they're kind of probably building those building blocks. But, but if I would go out to like a gathering, a party or something, especially at 14, 13, 14, I started the wardrobe that I have till this day, which is about 95% black. A t-shirt, a black t-shirt, whether it's a band shirt, a Star Wars shirt, a some sort of graphic on it, and black jeans, and I used to have this chain wallet where I had like a dog chain, but then I had keychains, or I had them going from like going through my pants. So there, you're kind of that's kind of like your way of rebelling a little bit, where you're gonna get some sort of reaction, and they're gonna be like, oh look, he's a little rocker, and watch out. I would always get the question, oh, do you like Marilyn Manson? And me thinking, why do I have to like Marilyn Manson? I just like that kind of music, but that doesn't identify me. And always getting that misconception. But I think in some ways I rebelled in it, because that's kind of like the only way you have to be individual.
Yep.
Because if not, you have to wear the tucked in shirt. You have to, put on the bland stuff to not call attention. So I think that was my way of kind of, rebelling. And I think at 14 is kind of when things started, or like the testing started of me and my mother, and it started with, I remember our neighbor used to have like a subscription to Playboy, and I would always see when it would come in, but he would never get them. So sometimes I would get them. They would come in a black package, so I would open them up, and I would take them to my room and like look at them and stuff. And one time my mom walks in, and she sees me with it, and that became a whole thing.
I bet.
Yeah,
Ooh.
she associated that with like she went through all my CDs, and she's like, this has to be the music. And it was like the great purge of '98. We threw away like a Nine Inch Nails CD, a Alice in Chains CD, like a bunch of stuff. And like I remember just kind of fibbing on a few CDs, because I was like, no, that's not bad, but like literally going through each one of my CDs and opening the booklets and saying like, look, this is satanic, or this is not a good influence. And me being like sheep like and going, okay, and that was kind of like the first hints of like me maybe rebelling. But I mean, you look back and it's just pretty much horny 14-year-old.
Yeah, because no 14-year-old boy is curious about any of that stuff.
Right. And we didn't have the internet back then, so that was our internet.
Yep.
And then once I get to high school, I kind of figured out a better way to do those things. Not exactly that, but like more just have my friends outside. And I remember down here we used to have local punk shows, and I started hanging out with some of the punk kids and some of the rocker kids in school, and we would go to shows. And I remember one time I missed a meeting to go to a show, and my mom kind of allowed it, but she would tell me, well, this is not good, right? And what you really have to do. But she kind of like let the leash out a little bit more loose, where she would let me do some of those things. I think she was probably trying to balance the iron rod with, let him figure it out by himself. And so she started loosening the reins a little bit. I never really did anything completely out of the norm that got me super into trouble. But I would go out, to a few shows. I would um, sometimes I would skip school. I remember, I think my senior year, I was skipping school to go to the beach, and I turn around and I see it's my mom in a car,
Oh.
and and, and she had just gotten me a cell phone, and senior year, so I was like, oh, I'm just going to the beach or whatever. She's like, okay, but by then it was kind of like whatever, senior year. But I would find my ways to kind of let loose a little bit. I was never someone that was going to go completely crazy and like, yeah, let's snort all the cocaine in the world. I don't even think we had access to cocaine at that point, so or drugs or weed or anything. Maybe I just never hung out around with those crowds, and I was never interested in those things at that time, or hung out with people that were interested in that. In the end, the people that I did hang out with were actually good kids. But looking at them now, where their lives are, they were all good kids. We were probably a little rebellious, but nothing out of the ordinary. Like, we went to the mall, nothing too big. But I think those were kind of like hints of me, kind of testing a bit. I remember in high school, there was always as a kid in middle school and elementary and growing up, you always got that idea of like, you have to try to preach to everyone, or they're not going to accept you with the way you are. But I remember in high school, and this was already just freshman year, we all had a conversation about religion and about people, and we were all 14, 15-year-old kids, and everyone was accepting of everybody else's ideas and opinions. And that came as like a shock to me, even at that point, where I was like, wait, this is not what I was told. Like, I'm actually feel comfortable. I actually feel comfortable expressing my opinion and, stating, something about, my beliefs and witness beliefs. And that was probably one of the first times that those two things, those two opposing views kind of met, where I'm supposed to think, all these people are bad and not accepting, but in reality, I felt really comfortable and felt like a peer at that point. So I think those few things started building up and building up. In high school, I never really had, a girlfriend on the side or anything. I remember I used to hang out with, like 17, I used to hang out with these three girls that were kind of like off the fringes, and nobody hung out with them, but I would hang out with them. And even to the point, they were probably the only people that actually came to my house, and my mom was like, hey, just hang out here. And they were nice. Their families were nice. Their families accepted me going in there. And those are probably the first times where I was like, wait a minute, like, I don't go too much to other people's houses in the witness world. I go to their houses. So I think those things kind of started testing in my head, but I was still very sheep-like. I never made the correlation. I think the first time it came head to head was, ironically enough, within the witnesses, because once I turned 18, I started hanging out with people from, probably in Miami. You have like the East Coast part of Miami, where it's a lot of Spanish congregations and that crew of people. And then you have the West Coast part of Miami, where those witnesses don't meet with the East Coast too much, at least in the Spanish. And there's about, I don't know, like 20, like per one English congregation, there's like 20 Spanish ones. So it's really like English is the minority here in regards to the witness world. And the English were always viewed as the people that, weren't as tight or weren't as strict as the Spanish. If you're going to go to the English, you're going to rebel. You're going to do whatever you want, like, be careful with those. That's how the Spanish viewed the people in the English congregations.
Yeah.
So,
I was interested in that because, Jehovah's Witnesses talk a lot about, they brag a lot about how there's no racism, or, they don't see that in their congregations and such. But I mean, I saw I saw congregations where, it was an English speaking congregation and maybe a Spanish speaking congregation was formed and now was suddenly going to share a kingdom hall with them. And I saw elders and brothers being very weirded out by having, these other people where they maybe didn't speak the same language in their, in what they felt was their kingdom hall, because they had,
Right.
been there first and for so long, which is ironic. But, they didn't like people coming into their space. And I think there were stereotypes and such that people felt, because I think that even though you're still in this supposed worldwide brotherhood, people still there's still us versus them. I mean, it's just a natural human tribal thing. And I still saw it even in the congregations. So was there some feelings like that between the English and the Spanish congregations? I mean, it sounds like, if nothing else, there was at least some stereotyping that, because I mean, heck, they're stereotyping here between the cities and the rurals, like the rural congregations are like, well, if you go to a city congregation, you're going to leave Jehovah and, they're all a bunch of ne'er-do-wells. Is it like that between the Spanish and the English down there a little bit?
Ooh, big time. Now, I don't know how it is now, but at least at the time, yes, big time. It was, if you're going to the English, and that was, 2000, 2002. It might have changed now because a lot of people and their kids, obviously growing second generation immigrants, they're growing up speaking English, and instead of staying in the Spanish, they have migrated. So it might be a little different now, but there was always that idea of like Spanish versus English, where it's like, oh, if you're going to go over there, you're going to do whatever you want. They're not as tight. They hang out in groups alone without adults. Oh no, and yeah, there was always that a bit of a clash, or like, oh, that's the English. Not so much from English to Spanish, but more the Spanish to the English. Hispanic culture, especially down here, and it kind of stems from the vast majority of people down here in South Florida are Cuban. Cubans come from a communist regime where in the witness world over there, you had to do everything hiding. So everything was hidden. The work was banned. So everyone's a little more judgmental because you had to dress a certain way. You had to act a certain way to not get caught. So those people come here, and those attitudes kind of permeate a little bit. And then you mix that with the fact that Hispanics are not racist, but they are nationalist. You can have an African American, American that was born here, and you could have a Afro-Latin Cuban, but yet that Afro-Latin Cuban will say to that African American will say, bro, that guy's black. And then you're looking at them and you're like, what are you talking about? Have you seen a mirror? Or and then even Cubans, and then there's like a second level of racism in there too, internally within countries. You could have a Dominican that looks at a black person. Mind you, Dominican Republic is the same island as Haiti, and they'll look at a Haitian and they'll be like, yeah, that guy is black. And then you look at the Dominican, you're like, you know where you are, right? Have you seen your skin tone? So there's nationalism and racism within Hispanic culture. And this is speaking as a Hispanic myself.
Because all people have that in their culture. Yeah.
Exactly. You'll see, I'm sure it happens, in the Midwest when they look at, Southerners or something, and they'll say, oh, what a hick. And then, but you're living in a farm, or, there's always looking outward as opposed to inward. So you mix that with the witness world, which is already judgy, that just puts it to a higher level of of just complete judgment of the smallest of things. Why are your pants so low? You ripped your pants. You're wearing a pin somewhere. If something's different, that's immediately a cause for alarm.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of that down here, especially between the English and the Spanish. So when I started hanging out with the English brothers and stuff, that kind of caused a little corrosion. Or I remember one time I think one of the Jurassic Park movies had come out, and I was like, like they're all going out. It's a Wednesday. I had my meetings on Wednesdays, but no harm, no foul. I'll go to meeting on a Thursday. So I go with them. I watch the movie. I miss my meeting, and the next day is book study. And I'm at the book study, and one of the kids that he was like 5 years older than me, but he used to hang out with me all the time. And after book study, he starts challenging me to the point of like, oh, you didn't go, or like, challenging me on the fact that I went and that uh, I'm not holding my priorities straight, to the point where we pretty much we're having a screaming match. Mind you, I scream once every 10 years. I'm very calm, but that just got me. That just completely got me. And I was, 17 at the time. I was never challenging. I never challenged my mom that way. And I'm here having a screaming match. This dude's screaming at me, and I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna scream? I'm gonna scream too." In a stranger's house, when we had the book studies back in people's houses,
Oh yeah.
and in front of like 10, 15 people. And to the point where like, we that kind of ruined our relationship forever, kind of thing. I never saw him the same way, and vice versa. But there was always that caused a bit of friction, and it wasn't like I'm going out with worldly people. I'm going out with people from another language congregation, you know, and that was causing friction, but those things, even at that point, never really, made me challenge my faith, kind of thing. But during that time, I also met some Spanish brothers from that area, and we started hanging out. And I had a friend there that we kind of connected, and that was my first time that I had to go to the back room. So yeah, so we I think we saw a movie or something. I went home, then I went back to her place, and we did things that we shouldn't do as witnesses. That was probably one of my first sexual encounters, and at that time, the guilt just starts killing you.
Yep.
Especially for me, where I had done some things, but at that point, those are one of those things that the quote unquote serious sins. And my guilt was just killing me. And a few months later, I go up to the elders and I talk to them. And then we had the whole committee. And at that point, that committee meeting wasn't that bad. That committee meeting was, they all knew me. They all knew me since I was a kid. I'm in the back room. They asked me for some details, but it wasn't horrible. I get privately reproved as an 18-year-old. But then talking to her, she had a completely different experience.
Hmm.
Like, they were asking her horrible details. They were asking her, like, when were you alone? Were you naked? Did you orgasm? Where did he touch you? We need to speak to him. We think you're lying. Like, they were just attacking her. And this is like an 18-year-old girl in front of three guys getting asked very personal questions about sexual things.
Yeah, and I guess this was in a
And
different congregation, right?
yeah, she was from a different congregation. So you're dealing with two different committee meetings. Where mine was kind of smooth. It was like we talked for like an hour. There was obviously personal questions, but I had expressed remorse. They wouldn't have known had I told them. So I think they took that into account, and being privately reproved, it wasn't horrible, but I did see afterwards, uh, in the Spanish and in the witness world in general, rumors are loved.
Oh
So
yeah.
everyone was not supposed to know that I'm reproved, but everyone knew I was reproved. I remember my group of friends at the time, we would go hang out in their houses, and uh, this person's grandfather was the presiding overseer of the congregation. And I remember him telling me later, "Oh, I think it's kind of messed up. My grandfather told me to be careful with you." And I'm like, what do you mean? Be careful with me? He's like, yeah, he didn't tell me what, but he told me you did get in trouble for something. So just be careful with you. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I've been coming to this guy's house for years, and now I am a bad influence. Now I'm, worse than, I don't know, worse than a child molester or something. Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm just, I just got in trouble. And I remember that getting in trouble that first time changed my view on people that got in trouble, because you would always think, hey, that person is disfellowshipped, hey, that person is reproved, and you would always think, man, like, they're a bad person, I gotta keep away from them. And when I got in trouble, I was like, wait a minute, I'm not a bad person. Like, why are these people not bad either?
Right.
And that kind of flipped my feeling towards that reproof system, and people that, not the system itself, but people that get reproved, because or that get the fellowship, not yet, but at least at that point reproved, where it was like, wait a minute, I'm not that bad. I'm not a bad person.
Yeah, it's
Why are
amazing
people
what a little of perspective will give you.
Yeah, it gave me perspective as an 18-year-old that stuck with me. But that first experience really just, it flipped the script on regarding how people are judged and how people are looked at within the organization. I think in general too, but mostly within the organization, where it's like, that person can't be that bad. And I kind of made it a point. I remember later on, once I got, because they give you back your privileges within like 6 months, as long as you don't mess up or whatever. And I got my privileges back, and I remember being in the back area and seeing a friend of mine just standing in the hallway with that look, and I was like, oh, I know that look. Mm-hmm. I've been there. And I reached out to her later. I was like, hey, like, I don't mean to pry or anything, but are you okay? I've kind of been there. And when that happened, that's exactly what it was. She had gotten in trouble for something, and at that point, I reached out to her. We became friends, and I kind of ended up doing that later on for other people too, that I would see, were kind of in trouble or something, and just that reaching out, trying to make a difference in some way, at least, to tell them, hey, look, you're going to be told you're a bad person, but you're not. You're not a bad person. And I remember it was because of that. That first time I got in trouble changed my perspective. And that's kind of the first bend. That was probably the first bend of where what they're saying and what I'm really feeling started happening. That was like the first time that it took a drastic turn, where I was like, okay, let me keep this in the back burner. I'm going to do things this way. I'm not going to tell people about it, but this is the way I feel about this, as opposed to how we're being told to feel about this.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were around 18 around this time. How did you go to college, or did you just go into the working world, or, because, when you're around 18, you've got, it's a big decision. Are you going to continue schooling and go to some sort of college? Are you going to go into the working world? Are you going to pioneer? How did you go from there? I mean, like, it sounds like things are, you're having these bends, you're starting to get some perspective on some things. So how did it play out as far as you being this adult person now, going through life?
So at the time that I'm 18, that was my father was never a witness. So he wanted me to go to school. And that kind of went the other way from what my mom wanted. I think she wanted, she wanted me to, pioneer, or to, not be pulled away from from the organization kind of thing. So the compromise was I'm going to school. But I can't go that far. I remember I got a letter from Florida State, and Florida State being in Tallahassee, me being in Miami, that was a no go for my mother. She's like, you're gonna go either Miami-Dade College, community college down here, or FIU, which is Florida International
Oh yeah.
University down here too. And and, and looking at things, my dad was a chef, and I started at that point, maybe a year before I became a vegetarian, and I started getting into uh, cooking. I had to cook for myself, and I started getting an interest in that, and I decided to go to culinary school. But the thing was, that may not have been. I kind of made that decision because when you're choosing to go to college, there's always that feeling, or that you get that feeling from people of like, oh, he's going to college, and kind of like questioning a little bit. Now, I wasn't questioned a lot because my mom, although she, you know, although she raised us just like how she wanted to raise us, there was no way no one else was even mentioning anything of how to raise us. So if that's what she said, she was not going to allow anyone to say anything otherwise. So I never really got the brunt or the idea that someone was telling me, why are you going to college? It was more like, okay, that's what the mom decided. Like, we're not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Like, you know,
They all had
it.
Latin moms
Yeah.
too. They weren't going to touch
Yeah.
that.
They all had Latin moms. Exactly. So, but personally, when you're going to college, you have that internal struggle because you can't fully concentrate on college or work because you have that struggle of, oh man, I'm going to college, but should I be doing this? Maybe I should be doing something else. And when I went into culinary school, they told me, the best thing you should do is get a job in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a job in a hotel, and hotel work is not easy, especially in the kitchen. You're working hours and hours. And so I was going to school and working in the kitchen. So I was doing 13-hour days, 10-hour days, 15-hour days. And it takes from each other. So I can't fully concentrate on college, and I can't fully concentrate on my career. So I'm going to school, and I remember, I'm just being tired, and that school just wasn't the best in general. That's another story. But in regards to being a school, so they had like attendance things, and I was absent and more than once, and so I dropped a semester, which means I dropped the money too that I had to pay for it because it wasn't cheap either. So those school loans stayed with me, forever, pretty much, like till I think I just paid them off last year. For a school and then a degree that I didn't finish.
Yeah.
So I went to school, but you have one foot in, one foot out, because then in the witness world, I wasn't concentrating fully on my witness things. It was going to school, but then if I go to meetings, I'm going late. I'm not studying, so there wasn't a lot of that guilt put on me by other people, but that indoctrinated guilt was just killing me, because I can't concentrate on one thing and I can't concentrate on another. So I didn't put energy in my career, and I ended up dropping out from college, and then just going in the workforce. I started, what job did I have then? Did I stay in the kitchen? I did. I worked with my dad at his restaurant. Then I worked after that, I started working. I got out of the kitchen completely, and I started working for a friend in mortgage. So I got into mortgage, I got into home loans and all that during that time, but I never really had anything stable. The money at that point wasn't great because I didn't really have a legit career. I was just kind of working, paycheck to paycheck, living in my parents' house. So career-wise, I wasn't moving up. I was just kind of there in the fringes. and and that kind of stayed that way until I don't know, 5 years ago, where it was just constantly, I went from mortgage back to the kitchen. I got laid off in the kitchen job because of the economy, then rehired. After that, I left to another job. And after that, I went to be a shoe cobbler. So I was a shoe cobbler. That was what, like a 26, 27.
Interesting.
And as a shoe cobbler, I learned a trade. Um, and I worked for a bunch of witnesses too. They're the ones that got me into it. Then I worked for another shoe cobbler, eventually owning my own business. Um, I lost that business, and then come that was around 30, and then I started working for Uber. I worked for Uber for a while. I drove for Uber. I worked for them, and then after that is when I have the job now, which I'm in. I'm in EMR software. I'm in pretty much the software industry for the past 3 years. So it's only been the last 5 years that, as a career, I've been stable.
Yeah.
Before that, you're balancing out back and forth, not really putting in your energy in that, not finishing college, and kind of being in this limbo career-wise for a long time.
Oh yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, we're not typically taught a lot of skills in particular that we can just easily translate, and it's difficult to go into the working world with no college degree at times, or no hustle. Like, everybody needs a hustle. You got to have something that you're that you're good at, that you bring to the table. And it's not easy when your hustle has been a hustle for Jehovah, your whole life.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
And where you're constantly torn in two, where you can't really give all of your attention to any one thing. The word focus, I like the acronym for it. It's like follow one course until success. And that's very hard to do when you have this life course that's been given to you from childbirth, pretty much, that you're supposed to follow until success. So anything else you're trying to do, it seems to always fall at least into secondary place. You can never quite give it everything. You can never quite really get skilled at it, it seems like.
Yep.
And it really, a lot of us start from a position of being years behind our peers when it comes to the working world, because we just weren't set up on a good path, and that can follow us for decades. It can, people end up with no retirement, and it can be a really difficult thing for people. So now, you were talking about your business trajectory there. What's kind of the trajectory of your witness life going through those years as well?
So I think they go hand in hand, because after I get in trouble in the Spanish, I'm 18, I'm 19, I've been reproved once, I come back. At that point, kind of like my shine in the organization is not as good, or at least in the congregation. Now I'm dull. I'm completely dull. At that point, some of my peers, get girlfriends or get married, at 18, 19, 20. I did have a core group of friends at that time that we would all hang out. I think we were all single at the time. We probably had one that ended up getting married or had a relationship at that time. At 22, I decide, my spirituality is kind of stalemated. I have to do something. And I decide to go to the English. It was funny enough, the congregation had made an initiative to assign an elder to a young person at that time that needed help, quote unquote. And I remember having that talk with that elder, and he's like, hey, so we're gonna I've been assigned to you, we're gonna do this and that. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm leaving. I'm going to the English congregation. And they're like, oh. And mind you, me saying that is kind of like telling them, oh, this guy wants to do whatever he wants. His mother is here, his sister is here,
Yeah.
but why is he going to another congregation alone?
I was gonna
Yeah,
say, here you go. You're
yeah,
gonna prove them right about going to the English
yeah,
congregation, aren't you?
yeah, yeah. Exactly. I affirmed their thoughts.
Yeah.
I pushed the stereotype forward, and uh, but I kind of felt like, why do you feel that way? Because I'm actually doing this for an altruistic kind of motive, like not even, well, I mean, altruistic toward myself,
Right.
but like I'm doing this for a good, my motivations here are good and pure. I want to get better. I want to get closer to Jehovah, you know, and but they didn't understand that, and I'm like, okay, so I left. I went to the English, and at that point, I kind of start flourishing. I meet a girl at that time that also moved from the English, and things start going well. At that point, I'd never really had a girlfriend, like an official girlfriend kind of thing. And we start dating, we start going out as friends, and that was like 6 months into it. But at that point, my mother had a condition called a primary pulmonary hypertension, which is the artery between the heart and the lung would kind of tighten up, and it would cause hypertension. It would cause retention of water, cause seizures. When I was like 13, she had a seizure, and we took her to the hospital. Nobody knew what she had. We finally took her to our hospital that figured out what she had, gave her a solution, and she was out in like 2 weeks. But that required her to have like she had a catheter on her, like 24/7, pumping that medicine in her, or to the point where we all knew how to make the medicine. We all knew the dangers of it. It was a very new kind of condition. I think only 1,000 people had it in the U.S.
Wow.
So it was very, very limited. So we kind of that was like 98, and that kind of had a shift in how she was with us too. She had a child in 96, my younger sister. So at that point, she has a 2-year-old. There was a point that my sister had to go to the hospital for something. I think she had like a urinary tract infection where she had to go to surgery, and both my mother and my baby sister were in the hospital at the same time. Like my mom was in one wing and my little sister was in another, at simultaneously. And I'm 13, I'm 14 at the time. She comes back. It actually betters her life. She lost like 50 pounds because it was all retention of water. She did have limitations, but she was able to kind of live a normal life, even though she had to carry that medicine with her all the time. But she was definitely not as strong-willed. If anything, I think maybe she got a different perspective towards me as well, towards her kids. Like me and my older sister, she treated us like very, very strict in regards to what we can or cannot do. With my younger sister, me and my older sister would say all the time, she would tell us we're eating, but she would ask my sister, "What do you want to eat?" As a small difference, and we'd be like, like we didn't get that. And but her kind of perspective was a little different. When I left to the English, she was kind of, she was on board with it. Obviously, she was a little sad about it. But I remember her asking me at the time, because I think this is something parents do, um, that we don't do as non-parents. They think of their demise a lot more than we think about their demise, or that we think about ours.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother knew she was going to die. Obviously you have the hope and all that that the witnesses have, but my mother knew she was going to die. And me looking back, I think of the things she would tell me. I remember her asking me once, if I die, and every time she would say, "Oh, you're going to remember me when I die," and me and my sisters would be like, "You're so dramatic, you're so like, you're just trying to get attention, but looking back, it's, she knew that, and she didn't outwardly say it. So she would ask me stuff like, "If I die, are you going to continue to go to meetings?" And I would be like, "Yeah, of course, of course I'm going to stay in the organization." Never, and actually meaning it. But I think she knew me better than I knew myself at that time. and she knew that, she was very rebellious as a child, and she knew that I was too, but not to the point of actually doing something about it. So I think she felt that, if she was probably the only thing keeping me in, and I didn't even know that. I think she's probably the woman that knew me the best till this point in my life, thinking back, and she would ask me stuff like that. I remember one time going home super late, and she was very nocturnal, and she was watching, I think was it Miami Ink, that
Oh
they used to
yeah,
give in, right?
yeah, the tattoo
And
show.
yeah, the tattoo show. And I walk in and I see her watching it, and I'm like, "Why are you watching that?" And she's like, "If I weren't a witness, I would have your guys' faces on my chest. I would be full of tattoos." And I'll be like, "Really?" Like it was a really shocking thing for me to hear, because you kind of get those human moments that, because once you get older, your parents start becoming more peers than parents,
Right.
and you would get kind of those moments. And I think, her kind of knowing her condition, she softened up on a lot of things. I remember when the first time I got in trouble in the Spanish, um she found out that I was in a committee meeting, because I didn't tell her. I didn't want to like put her through that. The next morning I wake up and she's there next to me, and I'm thinking, oh boy, this is going to be bad. And it was the other way around. Like, she was, very understanding. She's like, "Look, I know you're going through things, and I know that, you're feeling a certain way, but you could do better, and I'm here to help you." Or not even that. She was just very understanding, very nurturing, and very. It was a huge shock for me, because I'm thinking this is like the worst thing, and yet she was the other way around. She was very understanding and very, you're gonna get through this. You're gonna be fine. You're a good person. And it was very, very, very shocking. I think my relationship with my mother took a turn for the better at that point. Not that it was bad, but it took a different turn where it was like, oh, she's actually understanding. She's not, I think she started adjusting her parenting towards me at that point. And there were other times that, we would have our heart to hearts, like, late at night, you know kind of things. And so she's going through this condition. At this point, I'm in the English, and it's about year 8 that she's had this. And we had close calls for a little bit. I remember one time she cut her catheter by mistake, because she cleans it, and we had to run her to the hospital out of nowhere in the middle of the night. Um, I, I remember her having infections, and we'd have to take her, and it was kind of routine for us to think, oh, she's just gonna come out. And one day, I was going into work, and I see that, she's not waking up, and she had migraines too. So she was like, "Oh, I'm feeling really bad," and I'm like, "Okay, what do you want to do?" She's like, "Oh, let's go to the hospital." So I take her to the hospital. Um, at that point, they bring her in, and I'm thinking everything's kind of normal at this point, until the point where the doctor pulls me aside, and he goes, "Hey, we need her vitals kind of to go down, or if not, she's going to be in danger. She's not going to make it." And I was like, "Whoa, whoa, 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 wait a minute. What do you mean she's not going to make it? Like, this is pretty routine." And that was like the first shocker, like right there. And, she's not doing well at this point. She's got an infection, which for you and me would be fine,
Hmm.
because they would pump us with liquids, and you'd be asking your heart to work a little harder. But once those fluids pump out the infection, you'd be all right. But my mom, obviously going through this condition, her heart wasn't in the same um, condition as anybody else's. So I take her, and we're there going through it. We end up in ICU, because they're like, "Okay, this is what we have to do with her." And I kind of took the brunt of it, because my father, my father was working and stuff, and I was like, "Don't worry about it, guys. I got it." My little sister was 2 years, no, she was 10. my older sister had a 1-year-old, and she was going through problems in her marriage at that time. So I was like, I'm going to take this one, whatever's going on, I'll inform you guys, And I remember the whole time my mom was like worried about, I parked my car in like the handicap spot.
Mhm.
She had a handicap sign, and that's what she's worried about. And I'm thinking this lady's dying,
Yeah.
she's worried about me, you know, and it kind of tells you something about parents, where it's like, you know, you're worried about them about something huge, and they're worried about you with like the smallest of things that, you know, and it's not so much like to berate or make fun of a parent. It's more of like it shows you the extent of how much they care for you.
Yeah, a good one anyway.
Obviously, when
Yeah.
yeah, a good one. Yeah, obviously, there's probably parents that don't do that and haven't done that. But in the best case scenario, a parent that is a good parent,
Yeah.
like that's what they're thinking about. And so we take her to ICU, and I tell her, okay, I'll see you tomorrow morning, because in ICU you could only be there visiting for like a half hour or something like that, or 15 minutes. And so I said, I'll see you when I get back. And I go back home, and I get a call like at 1:30, and it's the doctor, and the doctor tells me, hey, we're gonna need you to come in because I don't think she's gonna make it through the night. And I was like, whoa, like that was like a shocker. Woke me up immediately.
Yeah.
And I go to the back, I tell my sister, I tell, and I'm like, oh, don't wake up dad, don't wake up my little sister. I'll go there, I'll see what's going on. And when I get there, she's pretty much, her heart stopped, and she was being kept alive by machines. So at that point, I remember her telling me constantly, if you leave me on a machine, I swear to God, like I'll kill you, and kind of, she did have a medical directive. I found out later, do not resuscitate. But at that point, I see her, and she's pretty much like, I get the options from the doctors, and the doctors, tell me, look, we could keep her on here. She may bounce back, but right now she's losing oxygen to her head, and she will probably be brain dead if we keep her like this. And I just thought there for a few minutes, and I made the call. I was like, okay, thanks. You guys, you took you guys did everything you could. And I made the call right there. I said, okay, pull, essentially pretty much like pull the plug kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I went to every person. I was like, thank you. You guys did everything you could. Once they pulled the plug on that, there was a machine that she had, a catheter machine, and I remember turning it off, and it was like kind of like poetic in a way, because like when you turn it off, it had like dials, and it was like 3, 2, 1, and then it went to 0. And I remember touching her skin. Her skin was cold at that point. Like it was pretty immediate.
Wow.
And I remember the nurses saying, that's, all she was doing was talking about you guys. And, you're there in a somber moment where it's like, you're just in shock. And I remember calling a friend because his mother had died. He didn't pick up. Then I called the girl I was with at the time. We weren't going out at that point, but we were, it was pretty much going to happen kind of thing. And then I called my family, and so that was probably the longest day of my life, because that day started like at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I get home, I just took like a little nap. And once I wake up, people start coming into my house. Everyone starts finding out. That part I will give to when in its best case. I'll talk later about its worst case, but in its best case, where it's conditional, you find out later it's conditional. But in its best case, everyone showed up. I must have gotten about 100 phone calls that day. Just people in and out. And everybody was there for you during that time. I remember the next day, I probably had like a 5-minute, just completely crying moment, and then I was fine. but the thing that stood out during that experience was the talk. So when we had the ceremony or whatever that we have at the
Yeah,
meeting,
the
I
memorial
remember
service.
sitting the memorial service. I remember sitting there, and there was probably about 5 minutes that they talked about my mother,
Hmm.
like really talked about it, and the rest was just, we're gonna see her in the end, and we're gonna see her again, and she had these beliefs, and this is what she believed, and it was very like insert person's name kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, Jesus had this, and let's go to the text where we know that she believed in this, and that, and she would have wanted everyone to hear this. Which, ironically enough, the person that gave the talk died a year later. Uh,
Oh wow.
fun, funny enough, yeah. Um, but I remember that standing out. I mean, at that point, you're not worried about that. You're just kind of worried about where your life is going to go. What are you going to do? Um, at that point, life just kind of, there's before that and there's after that.
Yeah.
Uh, because, there's a void. There's a huge void in there. She was definitely the matriarch of the family. She was, opinionated, funny, strong, everything. And then that's just gone. And my father, uh, was never the easiest to deal with, and we found out that my mom was kind of a filter for that. We didn't experience my father as much
Mm.
as we did after that, where we saw his deficiencies or his strengths, or we saw everything. And at that point, my father had to be he had to be a father, because my sister is 10 years old at the time. And at that point, the girl I was with, we started dating, and some of it was, uh, I had a great like 9 month span with her where it was happiness and it was great. It was awesome. I was her first boyfriend. She was my first girlfriend, um, and and it was great. But part of that may have been that I not may have been, but I realize now that I probably relied a lot on her in my happiness, because I lost the most important female figure in my life. It wasn't that I was replacing her; it's not that, but it carries a new weight of being with that person,
Hmm.
because now you're kind of depending on that person for a lot of your happiness, in all aspects, not just some aspects. So it's not so much her fault or my fault, or anything like that. It's more that, looking back, maybe not so much how much I loved her or not, but more of how much I put into all of our interactions, how much more they mattered, which may have been more detrimental for me in how I reacted later on, than they could have been without. So yeah, at that point, there's a huge void. Um, there's moments where my little sister is, she's growing up without a mother, so she had a few moments where it was like, either stubbornness or just acting out. Whereas a 23-year-old, I don't understand those things. But looking back, it's like, yeah, of course, she's going to act out in some ways.
Right.
She's a child without a mother that went through something traumatic, and during that time, I remember within my relationship, um, things started, uh, becoming or mattering more. The relationship got into a physical place also, where we started doing things physically that as a witness you're not supposed to do, and being more intimate, and I think that kind of made things a little hostile, not from my end, but on her end. I think she was kind of acting out a bit because things mattered more. Now that things were in a physical place, now the arguments got heavier, the fights got bigger, and for me, um, I was so dependent on her in all kinds of emotions that they hurt me a lot more. Those fights, those arguments, all those things, um, and and within that relationship, we ended up breaking up after like 2 years, and that was kind of the beginning of when I started to see the organization a little different, because we ended up deciding, we have to go to the elders, and so we go to the elders, and I, I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people that have been through this,
Oh yeah.
but I had, I don't know how long they've told you this, but I had a 6 hour committee meeting.
Yeah, I've seen some long. I've heard some long ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the most intense interrogation I've ever had in my life. Where I came out of there and I was thinking, I have told these people intimate things that I have never told anyone that I care about. Like, they know about me disturbing things that, not disturbing because they are disturbing, but disturbing because why do they know this about me?
Yeah, yeah, and the ones
Uh,
that I've heard that have been long are usually like about apostasy or something, where people are discussing the Bible or witness beliefs, and it
right.
sounds like that's not what yours was about. So 6 hours seems
No,
like a very long time.
it was not. It was pretty much about every detail. I had to pretty much detail a year and a half's worth of physical activities,
Oh,
and
good grief!
each interaction with detail that a forensic specialist does not go through. Like, what did you do to her? Where were you? How were you dressed?
What does it
Did you
matter?
climax? Did she climax? Right?
Right.
And just things that were just like, wow. And just to quote unquote find intent, even to the point where I got the question of, do you know that you encroached on her? And I'm thinking, are you implying that I raped her? Like, what are you talking about here? They almost wanted to convince me, not that I raped her, but that I did something that she did not want to do. And that was probably the one point where I was like, whoa, 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 let's back up here. Let's not confuse this terminology. Uh, if you're accusing me of raping this girl, like, I need you to tell me right now. And it was almost like they wanted me to come to that conclusion, but it was almost like not a physical rape, but I want you to come to the conclusion that mentally, her view with God or her rights, you took them away. and
Yeah,
and
they
I'm
want you to
like,
feel ultimate shame.
yeah.
Yeah, that
And
you impacted her relationship with God and her salvation.
it was just sickening. And it was like, I came out of there. I ended up being privately reproved after 6 hours.
Wow.
And yeah, and I was like, this is, I don't know, this is not right. This is not, doesn't feel right. But at that point, I was still not correlating the religion or being a problem or anything. But that was like the first hit on the pillar of my faith. That was the first huge hit, because it's like, these, this doesn't feel very biblical. This doesn't feel very, like, I don't know. It's I know that's what they're supposed to do, but I don't know. And I think at that point I was blaming more them than the organization.
Yeah.
So that comes out. Um, the breakup was kind of ugly, and but a lot of breakups are. So at that point, I'm kind of just cruising within the religion. Uh, uh, and that correlates with my career too. So my career is not going well either. So I'm just kind of cruising. And at 26, I end up back in the little room. I always tell people that just like, like in Canton, they have like busk of Hall of Famers. Like, whenever you go into the little room of any Kingdom Hall, there's like a plaque of me, like Jack Memorial.
Joaquin was
Just like,
here.
yeah, Joaquin was here, like, memorial. There's my bust. there with hands and face, or something, like I'm in the Hall of Fame, like I'm in the Ring of Honor,
You're in the Hall of Fame of shame.
yeah, I'm in the Hall of Fame of shame, and so I end up back in there. That one was a little quicker. That was more, like I get public reproved at that point, because at that point I had done stuff with a worldly girl. Um, so it wasn't that bad, quote unquote, because they don't involve another person. It's just I could literally tell them any facts or fiction, and
Right.
it's not like they're going to go correlate or investigate. It's all within. If it's inside, that's when it becomes a whole thing. So I end up publicly reproved, and a week later, I had been talking to another girl as a friend, and these are the 10 minutes of my life that pretty much landed me where I am right now. So I am talking to this girl. This girl is, and also kind of puts you in the mentality of a witness, where I'm talking to a girl that's 9 years my junior, and she's like probably months away from 18, but I'm just talking to her as a friend. Like at that point, I'm publicly reproved, so I'm getting soft shunned by some people. I'm the bad influence. I'm really just looking for. I'm not even looking for anything. I just, looking for friendship or talking and stuff. But as a 17-year-old, she's probably looking at me as like, he's really nice, and she came from like a sheltered family, and she tells me, hey, because I tell her, hey, it'd be cool if we hang out, like, with like 5,000 people around us, like like in public. Let's hang out in public, with people. And she's like, well, actually, I work with my family, and they're kind of leaving, and I'm going to be alone here. And I'm like, I don't know. That sounds like a horrendous idea. And she's like, well, like, we're just gonna hang out here. And I kind of debated, and I was like, you know what? Okay, I'll go. And I remember before going inside, I remember praying and being like, whatever you do, do not like even touch this girl. Like, you're just here as a friend, you know. And so I go in there. It's me and her. We're on a couch. We're literally just sitting there. Like, it's the most benign thing ever. Like, nothing happened. And it's almost, you almost get angry, because it's like, out of all the things I get in trouble for, I get in trouble for sitting next to someone alone, doing literally nothing. We playing tic tac toe, essentially. And her, I think her grandma's phone rings, and she goes, "Oh, she left her phone, but don't worry, I told her I'd give it to her." And in that moment, if I had said, "Fuck this, I'm out of here. Like, I'm going home. I don't want any part of this. Even though we're not doing anything, like, it's gonna look really bad. The optics here are pretty bad. Let me get out of here."
Right.
If I had left at that point, it is not very, but because you don't know how life goes, and you know what other things may have happened. But the possibility of me still being inside the organization, possibly married to her or someone else, and being mentally in and physically in, were probably really high. Because had I left at that point, no harm, no foul. Nobody knows about that. Nothing happens. We end up progressing to a relationship, possibly. None of the other things, the dominoes fall. And I don't know if I have another opportunity that kind of cracks my head and puts me in the road to have these things happen to me that question my faith.
Mm-hmm.
So I end up staying. 10 minutes later, the grandma shows up. She finds me with her granddaughter, and obviously, from a grandparent standpoint, I would probably react the same way. Who are you? What's going on? Do you see the age difference? What's going on here? And it blows up. It's a shitstorm. They call the mother, and then I have to call my committee and tell them what I was doing and what I was not doing. And obviously, like, the girl's family is like on high alert. Like, if you see this guy is bad news. And it kind of causes her, as a sheltered girl, to, when she turns 18, she reaches out to me. And I'm like, okay, cool. We could continue this friendship. Have you told your family? No, I haven't told my family. And I'm like, God damn it. Like, we're back at square one. And, but it ends up, kind of snowballing into, we end up having a relationship, kind of like, on the down low relationship. Nobody knows about it. Some people know about it, but it's kind of on the down low. That develops into a physical relationship. And we end up back at, memorial plaque in the back room. I end up back in the back room. And they end up disfellowshipping me at that point. And once I get that news, that was like the bombshell of bombshells for me. That was like, because I'm thinking, I'm going to you, I'm being honest with you, yet you turn around and you say, hey, cancer patient, instead of treating you, I am going to take away your access to doctors and to medicine. It's the time you go to reach out for help, yet they shun me. They say, this is not the first time. We think that, you don't know how much reproach you brought on Jehovah, which is such a bullshit term. But anyways,
yeah, it's a complete bullshit term.
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of this fellowship. And at that point, nobody knows, quote unquote, you kind of have 7 days to appeal, and the word starts getting around. And as word gets around, here comes another pillar that drops. Everybody kind of treats it as a death. You're kind of doing the death tour. Like, everyone talks to you, hey, come back, blah, blah, blah. We're here for you when you come back. You get kind of encouraging comments, but then I get this comment from this one guy that he was an elder friend. He always saw me as a little brother. And but he's someone that kind of overreacts towards things. And he calls me and he tells me, hey, I've been kind of angry about this, and somebody told me, but I had to calm down. Mind you, he's making it about him, not me. But I had to calm down and think. I have to tell you something. And how am I going to tell you? I need you to see the severity of this, of what just happened. Imagine yourself in a paradise, and imagine that, all your friends are there. I'm there. We have, animals there. He's building this picture. He was really big on metaphors and stuff. And then he tells me, now imagine your mother. Imagine your mother there. She's back. And now imagine me having to tell her why her son is not here.
Yep.
And I was like, are you fucking shitting me? I held it in, but I'm thinking, like, are you serious? Like, not, hey, this is the truth. Come back, because this really matters. This is really true. Not, hey, look at these 10 texts in the Bible. God's really coming. It's, hey, let me find your most vulnerable moment in your whole life and exploit it and use it as a ransom in some ways, or a blackmail, an emotional blackmail for you to come back. Mind you, this is, supposedly, one of my best friends and a guy that, like, is supposed to, like, have my back, kind of thing. And that really stuck with me. Because he had done something that made sense later on, which I'll kind of go into later. That, now this guy's at, strike two kind of thing of things that kind of break down the pillars of my faith.
Yeah, and that's a hallmark. That's Jehovah's Witnesses do that all the time. I mean, if you as a shunned person go to a funeral or memorial service for maybe a witness relative, I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I've read where you go to that memorial service and somebody comes up and makes some sort of comment like that you're a disappointment to the dead person, or that your mom or your dad really would like to see you in paradise. So why don't you get your act together? And like,
Oh,
it's just
I'll get to
awful.
that.
Oh, you got that too.
I got that too. I got
Oh,
that too.
nice.
Yeah, I got that too.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
it's
and it's
just
like,
they're pros at that.
yeah, absolutely. And so at that point, I'm at my lowest. I'm disfellowshipped. I lose all my friends. And on top of that, to mix it with my career, I work with my hands. So I'm either a chef or I'm a shoe cobbler. I get my fingers stuck in a machine. It tears my ligament in my finger. So at that point, I am jobless, careerless. And I had lost my shoe repair business too. I had lost that too. Jobless, careerless, businessless, friendless, socialless, everything less. Like, done. Nothing. I got nothing. All I have is, I'm living with my dad. He was a godsend on that because, he allowed me to live there, never really put pressure on me. And I'm at rock bottom. I'm a total rock bottom. I'm in a hospital bed, with my livelihood in my hand just gone at that point. A week before, I had applied for Uber, and I get approved. And at that point, Uber was just starting in Miami, so the rates were really good. I start driving. I had my accident on Thursday. I get surgery on Friday, and on Saturday I'm driving. And I'm driving without painkillers because obviously I can't take painkillers while I'm driving. So my hand hurts like a bitch, and I'm driving people around. But it's the first time I start making money. I start making good money, and I started seeing like, wow, like why is my life getting better when I'm out of the witness life? And that kind of started my career trajectory to start going up. So my career starts flourishing while my internal life starts kind of diminishing. And I remember going to a convention that year, and I'm there at the convention. Now, mind you, when you go to hall, you have 100 people ignoring you. When you go to a convention, now you have 16,000 people ignoring you.
Right.
And I'm up there like Quasimodo up there in a hunchback, like in the top, so nobody sees me in the bleachers. Like there's my friends. Nobody sees me up there. And I see my ex with another guy walking around, and I've never had an anxiety attack. I had an anxiety attack that day because I was like, this girl said she was going to wait for me, but then now that she also shuns me completely, and now she's with another guy. And I remember I saw her like whispering to him, kind of like in the wave, like that you would tell someone, "Oh, that's the guy I told you about." And I was like, I'm not that guy. Like, I'm not that guy that you tell somebody else I'm that guy. Like, no, all those emotions started coming to me where I was like, wow, I lost everything now. Not only did I lose everything, but she was probably the only reason I would have come back for, and now that's gone too. So uh, my head was just out of place. I had a rental at that point, and it was a keyless entry kind of car. I ended up throwing away my keys in some benign kind of thing. So now I'm stuck in the parking lot of the place I don't want to be in.
Oh gosh.
16,000 people
Oh no.
ignoring me, and I'm stuck there waiting for a tow truck on a rental car that now I probably have to pay $300 for a key for. It's another rock bottom layer.
I was just picturing you having to ask for a ride or something, and how awkward that would be.
Well, it was awkward because I had to go back inside and go, "Hey, look, look, I threw away something. When do you guys throw away the garbage?" They're like, "Oh, sorry, man, we throw away the garbage all the time." And so I know I'm stuck, And I'm sure what people were thinking, and they see me running in there, they're like, "Bro, look, he's disfellowship, and look where his life is. He's running in here, So I could imagine the optics on that. So I'm in the parking lot. I'm crying. I break down, and I start praying to God. I'm like, I'm not that bad of a person. Why are you doing this to me? I thought you would only challenge me to what I could bear. And and I'm just like in tears, like just like, why is this happening to me? I'm not that bad of a person. And I remember texting my committee meeting, like the head of the committee. Look, I can't take this anymore. Like, I need to talk to you guys. I need to come back. This is killing me. Like if I were anybody else, if an outsider were to look in and read that, clearly it would have sounded like I was suicidal. You know,
Oh yeah.
I wasn't. Yeah, I wasn't, because that thought never went through me. But like the words were there, and I was like, I can't take this anymore. Like this is killing me. And they're like, okay, let's meet in a couple of weeks. So I put together a novel, pretty much. I wrote like a 3-page letter to come back, and I explained all my feelings. I explained what I was experiencing, my remorse, all that. And when I go meet them, there's only 2 of them, and they're not 3. And I was like, really? So I am pretty much like pouring my heart out here, and you're not even going to sit with me to at least talk to me, because they straight up tell me, we got your letter. We're going to need another 3 months. We don't think you're ready. Now, they could have said the same thing and at least gone, hey, let's sit down. You sounded pretty bad. Are you okay? It was just straight up business like, which I find out later is in the elders book, but to do that. But, it was just so inhumane. It was so inhumane. It was so like, these people don't care about me. They follow the book, and that's it. And that started shattering there goes another pillar, because I'm like, these people, that God is not in here. God is not in here at all. I remember I wrote the second letter 3 months later. I had a few drinks. I was a little buzzed, and I wrote like 4 sentences. Hey, I want to come back. Because I was just kind of pissed. I'm like, I already told you guys my novel. I don't need to write a sequel.
Yeah.
Here's a preview. Here's a quick preview. And that they finally give me that committee meeting, and they interrogate me with all these hypotheticals. Like, if in 2 years, if you get a girlfriend, are you going to hang out with her alone? Are you going to touch someone again? Like, all these things that are like inconsequential. They were like, how often do you read the Bible? I said, like 4 days. And they're like, you have to read it 7 days. Have you tried informal witnessing? And I'm like, what kind of a question is that? You guys kicked me out of your religion. What am I going to go to a bus stop and go, hey, so my life is completely ruined, but would you like to hear about Jesus and join
That's
us?
crazy. They expect you to witness?
Expect me to informal witness. I got that question. Have you tried informal witnessing? I'm like, are you fucking shitting me? Like,
Wow.
Like, what world do you live in?
You're fired from my company, but have you gone out and door to door trying to sell my products?
Exactly. And so that got me more mad and more mad. And at that point, I start, I'm pretty angry at that point. I don't feel the love. I'm being shunned. Even with my family, it's very businesslike. They still kind of talk to me, but I think they talk to me with the premise of, he's coming back. And I would have people that would kind of sneakily like contact me too. Hey man, what's up? Are you going to meetings? Okay, cool. So they still kind of talk to you with this premise of like, you're coming back. But yet my life is actually going pretty well outside of it. I start working for Uber at that point. I get coworkers. Which turns into friends. I start seeing that those friends are actually good people, and worldly people are trustworthy. They're good people. They have good families. They invite me into their house. They invite me into their lives. Caring people, and that starts breaking another pillar where it's like, all these fears that we're told are they're just not true. I'm not seeing any of this. Yep. Every time I go to a meeting, I start thinking to myself, that's bullshit. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. Because they would say, oh, all the love that we have, and the love we show our brothers and all this. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting next to people that I have known for 20 years. and they look at me like if I'm a disease. They look at me like I am the personification of stage 4 cancer. And 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 you're saying there's love here, you know? So there was all these opposing things of how reality was as opposed to what they were saying on stage. And I start, missing more meetings. And when I was there, I remember leaving assemblies early. I think the last convention I went to was the one where they had the Job parable movie, where like this dude, like modern day, where this dude has a kid, has kids, has his father, and everything bad happens to him, and all of a sudden his worldly brother like offers him 5 grand and he doesn't take it for some reason. So I'm thinking like I'm already kind of depressed. I'm coming here to watch a video of how even though everything shitty happens to you, you still have to obey Jehovah. Like, and I just walked out. I was like, yeah, I'm good. Like, you know, my life's already fucked up. Like, I don't need to come here for a reminder. And those things didn't happen before, but they started happening more because my life outside of it started opposing what they were telling me. Like, life was going pretty good. And I started also questioning myself. I started building my own morale. I started building my own, you know, thought and view on life, even though I still wanted to go back or still thought that was the truth kind of thing. I had enough alone time that I could analyze all my steps and everything that's going on in my life. And it all kind of hit a point where at that point I wasn't listening to outside views or like apostates, quote unquote, apostate stuff. But I did start listening to podcasts, and I started listening to like Radio Lab, and that got me into Reveal, and that got me into other podcasts. So my mind starts expanding, and I start learning. And I remember they called me to like kind of check up on me, and it felt like I was going to a parole officer meeting because they were just asking, hey, how are you doing? So I see you aren't going to meetings much, but if you go to another meeting, just shoot us a text. And I'm like, so you want me to check up on you, like check up with you? And they're like, no, not check up with us, but just remind us. And I'm like, that's the same thing, and it just felt very like business-like, like there's no God here. And so that kind of got me to the point where it left me ready to be able to listen to an outsider's viewpoint. And I started listening to Reveal News, and they're incredible with investigative journalism. And it was December 2016. I'm in my bed. At that point, I had moved out of my house too, so I'm living out on my own. And the Reveal News Secrets of the Watchtower story comes out, and I get the chills down my spine, and I'm like, should I listen to this? Oh God, I don't know. This sounds very apostate, but I'm like, wait a minute, Reveal News, like NPR is not exactly the pillar of apostasy, like they're not, they're not top 10, things that the governing body's looking at, like, haha, and I hear and I go, you know what? I trust them, and the witnesses have kind of ruined my life, so I have to give this a listen. And I listened to it, and that was once I finished that podcast, I was so angry because I'm thinking I have to tell these 3 elders how many times I orgasmed in front of a girl, but yet this dude gets a microphone in front of him about child abuse, and he hides in a room. And the hypocrisy there was just astounding, and that was the final nail in my coffin. I said, I'm never going to meetings unless it's a funeral, and I'm never stepping foot in one ever again. Like, I am done with these people. And then that got me in a YouTube spiral of looking up everything, looking up John Cedars. I found John Cedars on there. I found Skeptic. I found You go from one to the other.
Yeah.
I found you with this JW life, um, and also friends that also have come out, and we start talking about stuff, and we start debating about stuff because. And talking about, should we go back, or what's the organization like, what's your life like, and it starts breaking down all of those lies that they tell you, um, and comparing it to real life, and they're just two completely separate things. And that was the final nail in the coffin for me in regards to the witnesses, to the point now where I'm obviously completely awake. I my A friend of mine, she helped me out a lot in my transition when I came out. Um, Actually, that same friend that in the Spanish congregation was in trouble, and I kind of saw that she was in trouble.
Oh yeah.
We were always like on and off, and then when I came out, but I always kept in contact with her somehow, even though there was gaps between, and we ended up being friends again, and she helped me out. Um, she introduced me to the job I am in now. Where like she's like, oh, interview this guy, and she helped me out with that. She helped me out with friends. She helped me out with a lot of things. And one of the things that she did herself was start a support group down here, and that kind of gave me a um, a window to be able, or like a permission almost, or a push to be outwardly vocal about my opposition towards this organization, because you know I started going with her to the meetings, and we co-host at this point, and we're up to, I don't know, 90, 95 members down here in the last 2 years.
I think I know
So
who you're talking about. I just spoke to
yeah.
her about these meetups that she has, and she was a really really cool person.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I mean, she definitely got me started on it. She just messaged me not too long ago about, sometimes she'll get, or I'll get messages from, members, and sometimes we have to meet with them, even like when it's not a meetup. We're like, hey, look, you need to meet us now. Let's do it. And just to kind of talk to them and see. And it's been something that at this point I don't need it for me, but I want it for others, and for them to share their story, and for friends of mine that end up reaching out to me and stuff. And I always say, hey, look, I'm always available, whatever you want to talk about. And it's to try to kind of pay it forward. And funny enough, like, as I mentioned before about the funerals, so last year my dad gets stage 4 cancer,
Mm.
and he was never a witness. But with getting cancer, like it's funny how uh, whether not in friends, but with family, it's like it's kind of like a time out, time in kind of thing. Like where it's like, hey, this really bad thing is happening, so time out on this whole shunning thing. Like normal normal talks can continue during this time. You know, and not to say that my family doesn't talk to me, like they do, but it's kind of business-like a little bit. With my younger sister, not as much. She talks to me more normal. I don't think she cares about the whole shunning thing. Um, but my older sister is more kind of like to the rule kind of thing. So it's very business-like a little bit.
Right.
And so this is going on. My dad is going through treatment. We find out, that the treatment worked, but it spread. So he ends up, going to hospice. He ended up passing away in October. And during that whole process, before then and since pretty much since 2016, I've been very vocal about my opposition towards the witnesses, and well, towards the organization. I'm not opposed to witnesses, and anybody could reach out to me, of course. But they kind of found out about it too. I remember like a post I had done one time about solitary confinement, and I correlated that to being disfellowshipped, because the conditions and the symptoms of someone that goes through solitary confinement is very similar
Oh yeah.
to someone that is dysfunctional. They have a lot of similarities. And I just correlated those two. And somebody sent that picture to my sister. She's like, what are you doing? People are going to think that you're against what the elders thought. I'm like, look, this is my experience, and no one's going to shut me up about it. You know, and and there was people that would still follow me on Facebook that I knew were witnesses. And then I think one day I was like, let me check if they're still following me. They're all gone. All of them are gone.
Yep.
They are not following me anymore. They're not secretly following me anymore. And then obviously I've been very vocal and very hourly spoken about it. Anytime I find, a New York Times or, or the Daily, whatever, anything from a credible news source, I will repost that. If they talk to me about it, I will do it. And so I, probably in South Florida, I may be like top 5 apostate down here if there were to be a list. At least that's how I'm viewed, probably. So, this whole thing's happening with my dad, and all of those quote unquote friends. I had one person reach out to me, one that is actively in. Mind you, these people are people that I have walked in their weddings. We were lifelong friends, shared everything with, kind of thing. And no one, absolutely no one reached out to me, to the point where we had a funeral, like a memorial thing, not in the Kingdom Hall, because he was never religious. He was never a witness.
Right.
And we did something in his restaurant. We told everyone, come dressed with a soccer jersey. My dad was a huge soccer fan. And I cooked for everyone. I cooked the paella for everybody, and for me that was like an ode to him. Like he was, like, his way of being was, having a conversation, and cooking for you. That was his way of showing love. I'm going to cook for you.
Right.
And so I thought, that's perfect. Like, we're not. I said a few words, and everyone just talked and cooked. But there was witnesses that did show up, and the funny thing was that my, friends that were never witnesses, and even those that came that were witnesses and are not, and they talked to me, every one of them, especially the people that were never witnesses, would say, man, those people were like really weird. Like, they were just like, they came, they would just stand and almost like judge everyone else, like visually, but they would be in their own corner, only talking to themselves. And then when they would kind of come up, because they came from my sister, but when they came to me, it almost felt like they all took turns, almost like, hey, my turn to say sorry to Jack. And the way that they would come to me is almost like if they stepped on my foot and they said sorry,
Yeah.
like very, like, kind of hug, and then sorry, and then next, sorry, next, sorry. There was probably one or two of those that gave me like a strong hug. And you kind of get the feeling that, if it were in different circumstances visually, they may have, gone all the way, or like, since these people are here, I can't really show all of my emotions. So I'm not going to be completely judgmental or say that they didn't care. Maybe they did, maybe, and I'm sure they do. But when you're in that mentality, you're conditioned to obey them first, as opposed to obeying your own feelings. So, I can't have empathy for how they're reacting. But, mind you, you're coming to my dad's restaurant, you're eating my food, right? And I don't have to do this. I'm the one that's supposed to be grieving, but yet
Right.
you're the one that is holding your conditions on how you're going to treat me.
But they're doing you a favor.
They're doing me a favor. They're the loving ones in this interaction. I had another funeral that I had to go to. My brother-in-law's dad, and I had one of my lifelong friends was there, and I walked by him. He doesn't look at me, but then he puts his hand on my shoulder and like shrugs, one of those shrugs of like, hang in there, buddy, or like, I would hug you, but I can't. And I'm thinking, you're dictating how this relationship is going. So either, for me, I prefer either you go all the way and you give me the human respect of a handshake and look at me in the eye, or you don't do anything. I prefer to be dead to you than to get this half-assed kind of like I would but I can't,
Yeah, it's like
because
pity.
that's a pity, and I don't need anyone pitying me. If anything, I pity you. What was it last week? We had events with our company, and we were doing like a scavenger hunt in the city. And I see people in the cart witnesses, and I knew them. I knew who they were, and I was just like, I'm not going to make a big deal of it. I'm just going to keep on walking. But I felt sorry for them, because I'm like, look at me. I am, not that this whole thing is fun or not, or if it's better or not, but I'm enjoying my life. Yet you're looking at me with pity of like, look how far he's come. He's got tattoos. He's got a beard. He's he's out on a Tuesday having fun, when he could be here standing next to a witness card, not talking to anyone. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
And
poor Joaquin, out there having fun being himself and enjoying the company of others.
for me, and and it was like, like you would think that at a very human level, this dude's dad's died. This dude's dad died. This is the second parent that dies for him.
Yeah.
Let me just reach out. And it's like, even at that point, the organization takes that humanity from you, where you're just a robot. And for me, it's sad.
Yeah.
It's not sad of like, what are they doing to me? For me, I feel pity for them, where it's like, because I was probably that person too. And, and it doesn't mean that I hate them or anything like that. It just, but part of you kind of says like, wow, like your humanity's that dead, like, ugh,
Oh, they have very little. Let me ask you something. It just struck me as you were talking. When your mom died, you can obviously see probably some measure of acting out on your part in relationships, or just trying to get in relationships because you probably missed your mom. You were grieving, probably some measure of escaping into relationships even. But I'm just wondering, did the elder, when your mom died, did anybody talk to you and try to get you some help or support for that? Because, that's a big moment in people's lives.
Did they? I don't think so. No. I think as far as it went, obviously, people were, and this is not so much a witness thing, but this is more of a human thing.
Right.
And I think this is probably the difference between, for example, my sister as a 10-year-old and me as a 22-year-old happening. So I am kind of stubborn in a lot of things. And maybe that has helped me in some ways. It took me a long time to realize how people and the world works. And I had to be brought to my worst moment in my life to have the best things in my life.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the catch-22 of things that happen in your life. Like, do you want to be disfellowship? No. But did getting this fellowship get me to where I'm at now, and do I appreciate it? Yes.
Yeah, the best lessons often come from the worst times.
Yes. Now, I had to learn that the hard way. My sister learned that as a 10-year-old, because when you are going through normal life, people, not so much that they take it for granted, but they have their own thoughts of, and preconceived notions of who you might be. This person is this person is that. They label them with certain things. That I don't want to hang out with them because of this. I don't want to hang out with them because of that, or whatever is going on in everybody's head. But when somebody dies, or when something very human happens that happens to everyone, whether it's a news of a bad disease, a breakup, losing of a job, any pivotal, huge moments, people do a timeout. And and at that point they say, okay, this person needs me right now. And most people, not everyone, but most people will do that. They'll be like, oh, hey, whatever you need, I'm here for you. They'll call you. They'll, do things that they don't normally do for you. And that lasts for a good few months. But after some time, things go back to normal. Normalcy starts happening, and then those calls start to fade away. Those actions start to fade away, and that's a normal human thing. That's not just in the witness world.
Right.
Uh, the only difference is that in the witness world, um, outside help is not viewed as everything is viewed, not so much outside help, but everything is viewed as something surmountable because we have prayer, God, meetings, etc. Like the five answers they give for everything. Everything is surmountable. And we see that, even with people with child abuse, like where you have to forgive your abuser because and this happens in religions too, not just the witnesses, but we see it in the witnesses a lot where like, hey, that person abused you, but, they're a good standing brother in here. And now, you have to respect them or you have to look at them. Forgiveness is a thing and everything is surmountable. So getting you help, they'll get you help. But if it really takes 3 to 5 years, for example, or your life to get help in normal situations, that's acceptable because you know what? That will affect the rest of your life. You need constant help. But in the witness world, that's not acceptable. In the witness world, it's pretty much, hey, are you praying enough? Because you know that if you pray enough, you're going to be all right. Hey, I see you're missing meetings. If you went to enough meetings, you'd feel better.
Yeah, I think when I was asking about help, I was asking about like actual grief counseling of some sort.
Yeah, and that none of that, none
Yeah.
of that. Yeah, and I think and that kind of goes back to them not seeing outside things as a way to help you because the answers for everything, whether it be grief, depression, pain, PTSD, anything, is prayer, meetings, service. That's pretty much it. That's the answer for everything.
Yep.
So I didn't get offered that, especially as a 22-year-old. Even my sister, as a 10-year-old, didn't get offered that. Nobody ever mentioned something about. I never heard about grief counseling, going through it, at all. That for sure never came up.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just wondering because it seems like a lot of times, when the chips are down, I mean, you got more than some people get. I mean, even just having calls or somebody bring by some food or something, a lot of times that doesn't even happen. But,
Yeah.
But, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, people who go through those kinds of traumatic things, and let's face it, you were the one who was there and you were the one who had to pull the plug.
Yeah.
There's trauma that comes with that. That's not a walk in the park. And
Oh yeah.
And people need to be seen and heard and validated through those times and to really talk about them with someone. And it's, a lot of times what you see with the witnesses and really just anybody, I mean, because it's just a human thing. We don't know how to react in these times. And so at best you might get a casserole or, somebody just drops by and says hi. But, those things fade. Actually getting some real help is something that can help you to deal with the grief and to work through it and carry it, through your life with you. So if you could say anything that you wanted to your friends and family that shun you, what would you say?
I think I would say I'm available. I'm not dead. I think one thing that the religion does do is that once you get shunned, it feels like a funeral,
Mm-hmm.
and for them and for you. And I'm not dead. You can preach to me, but remember I know exactly what you're going to tell me. So it's not going to work. And if you feel like you're doing something good for me or for anyone that's shunned by not talking to me, like you're honestly just not, you're hurting yourself more than you're hurting me, because the worst feeling would be that, whether it's my family, my friends, that you get to your deathbed at 85, 90 or whatever, and you somehow think that not enjoying your life while you enjoyed it helped. In those moments, I really hope that you don't think about that, because, and you don't have to, because those people are here now. I'm here now. They're here now. Life is here right now. And and there's no hate coming from me. I understand who you are, because I was there too. And maybe you don't have to reach out to me. It doesn't, whatever. Reach out to anyone, but just enjoy your life. Every time I see someone on the street with a cart, I almost feel like screaming out, "Go home, enjoy your life." you know, like and it's like, life is here right now. Life is ugly, but life is gorgeous, and it's out there. It's out there to enjoy right now. The paradise is not coming, because the paradise is here. And and it's not. You could be in New York in a slum that smells like piss. That's paradise, because that's life. That's life right now, and the gift of life. However we evolve to it, whether you believe there's a deity or not, we're here. And if there's anything in common between people that are in and people that are out, or people that are believing and people that are atheists, is that both of us don't know what's going to happen when we die. We are certain that we know, but in reality, we're all at 99.9%, because none of us know. None of us are at 100%, because that's reality. So to worry about 0.01% of something and have that 0.01% dictate how your life is, who you talk to, what you do, what you don't do, I just don't think it's worth it. So, you might as well enjoy it now. And it's not going to kill you. It's not going to ruin anything. And the worst thing would be to not be able to enjoy a family member while they're here, and then regret that you didn't enjoy their time together when you have no more days left. That would be the worst feeling. And I hope for them that they don't go through that, and they don't have to, because if it's me specifically or someone in their family that they're shunning, just enjoy them now, and their life will be better. They're not going to burn in Gehenna, they'll be fine.
Yeah, it's a shame that people forsake the life that they have now for a promise that has zero evidence of existence. I like what you said. Don't forsake the 99.9%, because there's the 0.1% that you don't know, and you think you know. So you're living based on that 0.1% instead of the 99.9. So, I do. I think most of us would say the same. We're here. We're still here. We're not dead. You can treat us like we're dead, but we're not. And we hope you all wake up someday, and we can be friends, and say hi,
Yeah, exactly.
So what's something that you've learned in these past 5 years that has really made an impact on your life for the better? It can be witness related or not, but what's this, some word of wisdom, something that has really helped you to be happy and free?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned has been, there's a life lesson in everything. And the fact that not normally and not all the time, but the only person keeping you from being happy is you.
Yep.
Because yes, I got this fellowship. Yes, I lost all my friends. Yes, they don't talk to me. Yes, I've lost my parents. Yeah, all those things are yes. But there's a podcast I listened to, last podcast on the left. They hourly talk about, the fact that they have mental issues. They have, bipolar disorder, or they have, anything they have. Now, I am blessed enough, I'm probably an atheist at this point, but I say blessed in regards to good things. I'm fortunate enough that that I don't have any of those, at least not diagnosed, hopefully, right? But they say even though it's not your fault, you're responsible for yourself. So, you all those things can happen to you, and maybe they will happen to you, but you are responsible for not letting them continue to affect you. And because you could carry that weight forever, and the only person you're harming is yourself. Because those people that are shunning you, those people that are ignoring you, those people that are affecting and damaging you, it doesn't affect them. It will not affect their life, because their life will go on day to day and they'll be fine. But it is going to affect yours every day, because you're constantly thinking about it, dwelling on it, and using that as a crutch to not move forward. I had a moment in my bed where I was, even before I moved out and all that, where I was miserable. And I just woke up, and, it goes back to like the old, cliche, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I sat there and I was like, I'm sick of feeling like shit. I'm sick of waking up every day and going, I got this fellowship. I'm sick of it. Uh, and I changed my life attitude from that day on. And have some things has everything gone well? No. But have most things gone well? Yeah. And in life, it's about percentages. It's not about 100% happiness or 100% sadness. It's about, if you're in the 60s to 80s range of most of the time things are going well, that's a pretty good life.
Yeah.
You're doing pretty good. You're doing pretty good in life. If you feel good 60% of the time, make a few adjustments, you might get to 70. If you're at 70, make a few adjustments, you might get to 80. But don't be sad if it doesn't. Just know that that's life. That's
Yeah.
the reality of life.
And
And I think,
ultimately, what you said, you kind of boils down to happiness is an inside game.
yeah,
You can have all the things in the world, seemingly from an outside perspective, and be deeply unhappy.
absolutely.
And you can also be a person who has almost nothing in this world, from an outside perspective, and be very happy. Be very happy.
Yeah,
Happiness is something that comes from inside you. It's not merely a reaction to external stimuli. Don't let the
yeah,
outside affect, or not that it's not going to affect, but don't let it dominate and define your inner being, your
exactly.
inner experience. Um,
Yeah.
so, what do you enjoy about your new life since you've been out?
Um, Besides the mental freedom, I mean, I think it's the biggest thing I enjoy. I think is the fact that I am in control of all my decisions. I am in control of my consequences. I am in control of my circumstance. Um, and that attitude has gotten me to where I'm at now. Like I have a smaller group of friends. I have a good job. I have not just a good job, a good career. Those friends that I do have, a lot of them probably are ex-witnesses too, and we have that shared experience. So there is a deeper connection there. I, well, I could always have a cat whether I'm in a cult or not, but I got my cat. I
Apostate
was
cats are the best.
apostate cats, right? Yeah, yeah. My cat's just walking around going, 1914 is alive, just walking around. Um, I was able to. I've always played music, but I was never in a band really that we did stuff. I was in a band right before I got the yacht, which is funny. But I've been in the music scene down here for at least the last 3 years. So I've been able to enjoy that. I've been able to finally write music too. It was something internally I never found, a way to do, and I was finally able to find that. And then just being able to enjoy something without having to think about it 5 times. Like as a
Yeah.
witness, yeah, you have to think about, is this video game good for me? What is this going to say about my spirituality? What if somebody comes in? Like, I don't have to worry about that stuff. I do I have to worry about it internally, as in more like, is this going to take time like, am I going to get late to work playing this game or something, sure,
Well,
you
yeah.
still you still yeah, you still have to think about that stuff, but it's not as completely draining as the witness life was mentally. Nowadays for witness, it's got to be just, especially with social media, it's got to be just, like you have to worry about everything, everyone at all times, and on top of the fact that the so there's very few places they could turn and be like, something from the witnesses is not going to come up. You're going to hear it on NPR. You're going to hear it on A&E. You're going to hear it, like things that quote unquote they could enjoy. The world is kind of catching up and like putting it in their face.
Yep.
I don't have to worry about that stuff.
Yeah,
Because
that's
it's
awesome.
like, yeah, I don't have to worry about that. I could just live my life and make my decisions based off of my moral code and really stick to the important things, which in life, it's not 5,402 things. It's not like I broke Article 2, Section 1, P4, that, I could only touch myself outside of my clothing, and it's porny or whatever, like I don't have to, I don't worry about that.
Right, right.
I just worry about the main things. Don't be a drug dealer. Don't kill people. Don't be an asshole. Be kind to others. Like you say, be kind to others. Do no harm. Right? Go be
Right.
happy.
Yeah.
Like that's what I got to worry about.
So
And it's a freeing life.
yeah, yeah. So it's beautiful to be free like that. What do you want to do? What kind of dreams do you have now that you can actually look forward and see that this life is yours?
Right now, I think the biggest dream I probably have, I keep it as a simple dream,
Mhm.
where it's just, do something that makes you happy.
Yep.
Like, for example, now, I think within the next 5 to 10 years, I'm hoping to, settle down somewhere to, find someone, build a family. That's probably what's next. So I think when it comes to dreams that could be a pipe dream, could not, obviously I have my music, and that would be great. For me, I would drop everything and like, and be a musician all time. That would probably be the ultimate dream. And I'm actually on the road to at least be considered for a dream like that. Whether it happens or not is inconsequential. I think what brings me happiness is that at least I'm on the road for it. I think, like for example, when they say, Charles Barkley was a great player, but he didn't win a championship. But if you look at Charles Barkley, he's probably happy as hell. Like just because he didn't win a ring doesn't mean that he's not happy.
Yeah.
You don't have to get complete final goal to be totally happy. But I'm on the road to, if I get that final goal, cool. If I don't, cool. But I was able to enjoy the process of writing music, of being in bands, playing music with others, playing shows, whether in front of 10 people or 100 people. That would probably be like my biggest dream to happen. Whether it happens or not, we'll see. But at least I'm on the road for it. And, there's always that dream to the small dreams of being able to have, a bunch of instruments you don't play all the time all around you. I'm looking at a drum set, I'm looking at guitars on my wall, and I play all the time. So it's like, that's a small dream that I could have. That's not even like a non-witness dream, but like, if you live in an apartment, you can't do that. I live in a house, so I can,
Right.
so I can do that. So I start little, and I think if you have that right goal within your center, anything is possible. Whether it comes true or not, it's about the journey, not exactly the destination.
Yeah, I was just thinking that as you were talking. It's about the journey, and you're going to take a lot from it if you only focus on the destination and you don't hit
Oh yeah.
that end goal. Then you're going to be miserable. But if you focus on the journey, stop and smell the roses, enjoy it, be present, you'll be better off for it. Even if you don't end up at the ultimate destination, you'll still have had beautiful and wonderful experiences in your daily life. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that you're doing all this. I appreciate you sharing your story. I love that you've got this meetup that you're a part of. I hope that telling your story is cathartic for you, helps you through your own journey, and that I'm sure you'll help other people who have experienced some of the things that you have through loss and the Oh, the judicial committees that many have been through,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah, and the shunning and everything. But it's a good message. In the end, we get to choose how we experience life, and we don't have to just focus on the bad things that happen. And
Yeah.
we can make our life our own. So I applaud you for doing so.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Likewise to you, man. Putting your story out there, that takes guts. So that's awesome.
I want to thank everybody, all these 10 episodes that I'm releasing pretty much at once. I want to, thank everybody who was brave enough to tell their stories. It takes courage to speak out. And I know it's very cathartic for people to listen back to later. So I wish the best for everybody. If you want to support the podcast and the work that goes into it, or the new website, xjwhelp.com, you can support them both at patreon.com/shunned. Patreon is Patreon. So that's patreon.com/shunned. This work matters. It matters to the people that are listening. That would be you. It matters to the people who are watching videos that are helping to find or finding the help that they need. It matters to the people that get to participate and hear their stories being told in their own voice, or that sometimes reconnect with other people from their past through their episodes, or even you reach out to these people and leave a comment of encouragement to them, and that matters. It matters to people that are listening that are from other cults, and they get to see that they aren't alone because there's so many similarities. So if this matters to you, please support it so we can help more people. You can also support by leaving a 5-star review for both Shunned and This JW Life, my initial podcast. These reviews help others to find these stories so that we can help them heal. And if you hear an episode that you like, share it on social media. Tell others on the XJW Reddit or some group about it. Wherever you are, if there's something that impacts you, one of the highest compliments you can ever pay is to pay it forward and to tell other people about the episode or the podcast in general, or the coaching or the Shunned Recovery Project or whatever it is that's helping you. Please help share it to other people, because there are a lot of people that don't know these things exist. If you like, that goes for the new site as well. If you like the new site, xjwhelp.com, please share it to others. Keeping it to yourself isn't going to help anybody. So let's make 2020 the start of something big as a community. Support good work. Participate if you can. Help others, and let's take our power back. If you want individual help, then reach out to me through xjwhelp.com or shunnedpodcast.com. Leave a message of support for the people telling their stories. Get resources mentioned on the website along with links to support the show, or contact me if there's something that you need to discuss. Join the Shunned Podcast Facebook group, which is a support group. So get involved. If we want something different, then we're going to have to do something different. Let's be the start. The song for the show today, as always, is No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And as I end all episodes, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God.